the couple flew to Miami. And y'all, guess what? When they flew to Miami, Wallis Simpson had her eyes bandaged because she was afraid of flying. That makes zero sense on multiple levels. This is like the mental reasoning of a 2-year-old. No, I can't see it. If I can't see it, then it doesn't really exist. You know what I'm saying? Like, who bandages their eyes because they're afraid of flying? But also, if you have some kind of weird strategy that works for you so you can cope to get on a plane and fly out, why weren't you using that strategy when they tried to send multiple planes to get you when you were in France to take you back to England for safety at the beginning of the phony war? But now that she wants to go shopping, she's figured out a plan on how she can cope with her fear of planes. Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. It's Sunday, and that means that we get to do another episode of Traitor King. And I just love this book so much. And this chapter today is juicy details because we're talking about David and Wallis in America when they were told not to go, and the ridiculous tour that they are trying to make into a royal tour when they do not have the right to behave this way in North America. So they decide to go for a variety of reasons, all of which are just a cover for their more devious plans. We'll go into it. Now, this chapter starts out right where the last one ended. Remember, David had given an interview in which he had said explicitly that England was going to lose, there was no hope for her, and that America should just not bother to get involved. David's been saying this to anyone who would listen, so this isn't necessarily new information if you know David, but this is new as far as his public platform. And if you'll recall, this really burnt Churchill's biscuits. He could not believe that David would come out and say any of this, and that if he doesn't know how to talk in an interview, he should really get some help, and that Churchill, as always, would be willing to help him navigate the dicey waters of publicity. Well, David would never admit that he had done anything wrong. He would never receive chastisement with any degree of maturity. But David shoots back,
well, you know, they always lie all the time in American journalism. Always. And also, you should know that one time Life magazine allowed the Queen to say about my wife that she was nothing but that woman. So what are you going to do about that?
So as you can imagine, Churchill just did not respond. Like, all right, well, you childish baby, go in the playpen and play with the trinkets that your wife has spent thousands of dollars on and just shut up. That's all I want you to do. Just shut up. Don't go out anywhere. Don't talk to anybody. You don't have any words to say that are worth hearing. So it's not the best relationship between the two of them. So when they decide that they want to go to North America and Churchill says, please don't, David blows right past it. Like,
I don't care.
You know. And yes, I am going to adopt the Harry voice for David. I had held out against it for quite some time. And then I decided, why would I do that? These two are the same person. Okay. Chapter 12, Under Surveillance. But of course, before we can begin, please like, comment, and subscribe. I do not need to ask you all to comment because you are excellent at keeping that comment section quite lively and well-informed. But if you would just take a minute to hit the like button, YouTube loves the like button. And they are only too happy to help you if you can get your people to press the like button. So if you would mind doing that as a little gentle favor to me, I so dearly appreciate it. Okay, chapter 12. And this episode is called Under Surveillance. It begins in 1941, spring of 1941. They are in the Bahamas, which they hate. I don't really know what's on the island, but apparently in the 1940s, it was quite literally a post of exile. Like when they would refer to it as Elba, meaning exile, they weren't joking. There's really nothing there. And there weren't, for two people who their whole lifeblood is entertaining and parties and hobnobbing, I mean, this really was a hardship post for them. And their complete and total disdain of having to be there. I think people with a good attitude who were used to a higher elevation of lifestyle would still have found this a difficult place to live. And for these two who have always had the worst attitude of all time, this was like being quite literally sent to hell. I mean, they just are beside themselves with grief over where they've been. So they're constantly looking for a way to get out so they can continue their lifestyle of hobnobbing, shopping, dinner parties. And, that's why they are so tight with this Axel Wennergren, because regardless of the fact that he is looked upon with the side eye by every intelligence agency in the West, they're not bothered by that, because he is somebody of their class and echelon, and they need friends. Who else are they going to entertain if not this guy and all his dignitaries that are coming visiting? Remember when they opened their home to that entire Mexican delegation when they weren't supposed to be having any kind of relationship with the Mexicans? Well, it didn't matter, because these people were of a higher class, and they're so tired of having to mix it with the locals that they were willing to let people into their home that they had no business letting into their home. People who were on an FBI blacklist. Well, whatever, they're of the right class, so let's just let them in. Anyway, the chapter starts out that the Windsors required permission to visit the United States, and they were lobbying to make another visit. But the authorities suspected that the trip might involve Axel Wennergren. Oh, that guy, he was such trouble in the last chapter. Churchill advised that the trip, quote, would not be in the public interest, nor indeed in your own at the present time, and that Wennergren was, according to the reports that I have received, regarded as a pro-German international financier, with strong leanings towards appeasement and suspected of being in communication with the enemy. Well, what difference does that make to David? He's in communication with the enemy also, so he's not going to cut people off if that's the reason we're not supposed to be hobnobbing with them. Now, one of the consequences of that Liberty article that he had done was that the FBI now put the couple under surveillance whenever they were in the United States. In a memo sent to Hoover, the head of the FBI, it was stated that this request to put them under surveillance was predicated upon information which we have had in the past concerning these people, that being the Duke and Duchess. At the same time, Roosevelt wanted agents on Southern Cross, Axel Wennergren's yacht, because, quote, it was easily possible that the Wennergren yacht might have evidence of suspicious activities on board. And Roosevelt wanted greater energy in covering the activities and connections of Axel Wennergren. On April 18th, the Windsors arrived in Miami and were driven to Palm Beach, where they were staying at the Everglades Club. The ostensible purpose of their visit was to see Sir Edward Peacock, the Canadian financial advisor who had helped negotiate the abdication settlement. And, according to David, they wanted to talk to him about their financial affairs. But they weren't spending all their time talking to him about their financial affairs. They were shopping and playing golf. The only two things these people know how to do, apart from ordering all their staff to whip up a dinner party. How much shopping can these people do, you ask yourself? Well, quite a lot, according to the locals. It did not go down well. The book said that an intercepted letter was found that showed how the local people really felt about the Duke and Duchess. The letter stated, "What do you think of the very precious Duke and Duchess of Windsor charging up to $30,000 worth of knickknacks during their brief stay in Miami, Florida?" wrote M.L. Smith of Encino, California, to Mrs. Begg in Aberdeen. The nerve of them, leaving those shoppers holding the bag because dear Edward was unable to take any money out of the Bahamas because of wartime restrictions. Now these various shopkeepers can only hope that they will be paid when the war is over. Drama. But also, why did these shopkeepers sell people things who don't have money to pay for them? If you don't have a credit card, and you don't have any viable means of credit here in this country, why in the world am I going to let you take things out of my shop just because you're a famous person? Absolutely not. Show me the money. The FBI had recruited 2 informers from the Windsor's entourage, Alistair Alley McIntosh and William Rhinelander Stewart. McIntosh was a former equerry to the royal family, and Rhinelander Stewart was another golfing partner of the Duke and had also been his best man at the wedding. So you can see what an abominable person this David was, if even his own best man was willing to turn on him and start talking to the FBI. Rhinelander told the FBI that there was a current rumor and gossip in Nassau to the effect that when Hitler defeated England, he would then install the Duke of Windsor as king. And the only person that rumor could have come from was the Duke himself. If David's going around at dinner parties being like, hey, guess what? When Hitler tears my home country down, I get to be king again, that person isn't suited to run a doghouse. How is it that you are going to show up and tell people things like that make you, first of all, sound like a crazy person for having a close contact with Hitler, but then second of all, that you would be willing to rejoice at the downfall of your own country so that you can go back to a job that you already originally had? You could have been the king during wartime. You could have been the one in charge, but you chose not to. Anyway, Rhinelander Stewart went on to say that the Duke was so embittered against what he thought was the raw deal his people had given to her that such a change might be brought about. He also stated that he was told that at a dinner at the government house where the Duke and Duchess were piped in, after being seated, the Duchess made some remark to a dinner guest and then turned to the piper and made the statement, "You can also report that to Downing Street," which indicated to everyone present that she thought that the piper was some kind of a spy for England. Stewart said that the Duke looked upon Nassau as a sort of Elba for himself, and that undoubtedly he does have some personal political aspirations. Well, of course we know his political aspirations. But the fact that the Duke thinks that this is some kind of an exile, as though he's really placed and pieced something together, is just more evidence of his idiocy. Of course it's an exile, you dear man. Why wouldn't it be? You're over there hobnobbing with the enemy at every turn of the way, and they placed you on an island in the middle of nowhere with nothing on it, and yet you still find people in the enemy's pocket to be friends with? The only place they could put you where you wouldn't cause trouble would be the moon. I just can't even believe that he's rubbing elbows with people being, "You know what? I think I've been exiled." Yeah, I think you have been, man. Anyway, on May 2nd, the FBI agent wrote again to Hoover, claiming that Robert Palmer Huntington, the architect and tennis champion, had proof that Goring and the Duke of Windsor had entered into some sort of an agreement, which in substance was the effect that after Germany won the war, Goring, through control of the army, was planning to overthrow Hitler, and then he would install the Duke of Windsor as the King of England. What? Now this is a little bit of new information. How many times do we have to hear that David is going to be king once Hitler overthrows England? I mean, that was interesting the first time we heard it, but now every single chapter they continue to throw us this little bit of information from just a different source. All right, so we've established it. That's what's going to happen, and David's telling everybody, and everybody knows it. So I'm kind of done with that one, but I am interested to hear that apparently David and Goring had a sort of side alliance going, in which Goring was going to use the army to overthrow Hitler at the end, and then he would be on top and David would be his pal. How in the world could David take Goring seriously? Of all the people in the world, why would he choose simpleton David to be his, partner in life after this? I mean, does David really believe this? How does he not know that this is just so much hot air coming out of these people's mouths to him, just to make sure that he stays close to them and they'll just feed him any line? I mean, Hitler probably told Goring to tell him that. Now, another FBI source reported that another FBI source who had spoken to Ali McIntosh, the equerry for David, that there was no doubt whatever, but that the Duchess of Windsor had had an affair with Ribbentrop, and that of course she had an intense hate for the English since they had kicked them out of England. So, okay, I have a couple of things to say about this. The fact that I knew, and you knew, and we all knew that she had had an affair with Ribbentrop. The very fact that she wanted to give that interview at the very beginning of the book, in which she had stated explicitly that she hardly knew the man, that they didn't even run in the same circles, that one time she'd met him at a party, but that was all. We all knew that she was running cover for the fact that she'd had an explicit love affair with this man, and that it had been going on when she was with David. Why would you even talk about something that you knew that there was never going to be any evidence that you had been with this person? Like if somebody wants to lie about you and be like, she was with so-and-so, but you know that there's never going to be any evidence that comes up about that, and that's just a stupid lie, then why even dignify it with a response? Like, don't even. Who cares? That's dumb. But she had to make sure that she got ahead of the story. Well, Ali McIntosh, who was in the entourage of the king and had known intimately what was going on in the household, knew that she was indeed having a relationship. And we are going to get more color on that later from a family friend who would have been in the know. We'll get to that. Stay tuned. Anyway, everybody is only too happy to say what they know about this couple. That's what's becoming evidently clear. Everyone hates them. Nobody can wait to run to whatever source that they can find, the highest source they can find, to say, hey, wait, I got something to say too. One time they did such and such. Nobody is trying to help these people, cover for them. Nobody would be willing to do so. But with that being said, I do want to say that I think it's very interesting that repeatedly, over and over and over in these FBI files, they're only too happy to report the gossip, but they can't ever seem to spell the names of the people involved correctly. Now, it could just be the teacher in me, but I feel like if excellence is what we are going after, the spelling of a person's name who's giving you the information the proper spelling of that name would be like the lowest level of accuracy that I would hope to find. If the FBI are supposed to be getting detailed information so that they can build a file on someone, it would stand to reason that if you care about accuracy, the first thing you would do is make sure that you have the names correctly spelled of everyone involved. And the fact that they don't seem to think that that's all that important makes me feel like they would have taken in any bit of gossip and called it truth. Now, I want to believe all this, so I'm just going to say it's true. But if I want to be a little bit more, I don't know, honest, I would say that it does concern me that the FBI agents were such poor spellers, particularly in the way of getting people's names who were involved in the story. That's just me. Now, anyway, there continue to be numerous reports of the outspoken political views and extravagant spending of the Windsors from the postal censorship interceptions. Now, you know that everybody's mail was being read. So we had lots of gossip going back and forth through the mail. And one of the things that people loved to talk about back and forth with each other was, well, I was talking to the Duke and he told me this. And of course, the Duke's always saying the same thing to everybody. David's line this entire time, every person that he talks to, every American that he talks to, this is his line.
It would be an absolute tragedy if your country came into the war. The only thing to do is to bring it to an end as soon as possible. Don't even try to enter the fray. I mean, it's a lost cause. They're all going to die over there. And you don't need to send anybody in. It'd be ridiculous.
So everybody just thinks they're the first person who ever heard that. And they can't wait to write home about it and be like, do you know what he said? So we get a lot of those. And we'll skip past some of that because we can only be told the same thing so many times. Now, I will say that in May, a letter was forwarded to Churchill written by the Wall Street stockbroker Fraser Jelke. And he said that he had dined at Government House several times. And he was amazed to be told by each of the people at the house personally and separately that they were opposed to America entering the war, as it was too late to do any good. And the Duke had told him, I've always been a great realist. It is too late for America to save the democracy in Europe. She'd better save it in America for herself. So that would be shocking if you didn't know that that was the outlook that he took. It seems so defeatist. It seems like, well, wouldn't you at least be cheering for your home country? I mean, I know that you don't currently live there and you guys have like a couple of issues brewing, but those are your people. Are you so you're just okay with it just being bombed? Like you don't want anybody to go in and try to help your country? Like your former kingdom, you don't, seems to me like you might have a dog in this fight. Yeah, he didn't care. Postal censorship had already picked up a similar letter that stated the same things. That Jelke, the stockbroker, had the feeling that Axel Benegren probably had some channel of communication with the higher German authorities. Duh, we've established that. And that several nights later, the Duchess told Jelke that if the U.S. entered the war, this country would go down in history as the greatest sucker of all time. And Jelke had the impression that they both admired Hitler. Yeah, you don't think, Jelke? Because let us not forget that for their honeymoon, they went and visited Hitler. You guys are some hardcore fascists weirdos. If you're like, you know what, let's do on our honeymoon? Let's go visit Hitler together. Like weirdos of the highest order. Okay, so to continue on. In April, a letter from Lady Lawford in Palm Beach to Mrs. Darlington was intercepted after their most recent American trip. And this is just a scathing bit of background info. The Windsors were here for a week. They had maids, valets, secretaries, majordomas, etc., etc. Special cars, planes, and no one knows how much it must have cost. She bought up most of the swing shops, antique furniture, jewelry, etc., and the British out here almost penniless, and it has made everyone very bitter. Even their dogs came and had a special vet to attend them. They spent like drunken sailors. The Windsors given each a $5,000 car by a very rich American, one of the Woolworth family. Yeah, I'll tell you what they're doing. They're giving England the middle finger. They're telling England, oh, you guys have to live penniless. How hard for you? How hard for you? We're not going to put ourselves under those restrictions. You decided to boot us out of your country and say that we're not important people anymore? Well, that means we don't have to follow your hardship plan. Sorry. Sucks for you. The following month, Sir David Montague, Douglas Scott, an undersecretary at the Foreign Office, exasperated by the Liberty article and various reports on the Windsors' activities, minuted, "The Duke of Windsor is notoriously pro-Nazi. He is also a heavy drinker, and what few wits he had have wilted. He should, of course, never have received a post like this, where despite his intellectual insignificance, he is capable of much harm, as is now clear. I propose that he should now be told of the harm that he has done and strictly prohibited from giving any further interviews at all without having his text vetted and authorized at home. This prohibition should be made public. Can you imagine? I mean, the scathingness of that. He is a heavy drinker, and what few wits he had have wilted. Ooh, the stinging blow. But it's true. And, it's true that the prohibition on his talking should have been made public. Like, they should have made that a rule and then told everybody else he is not allowed to speak to you unless his words are vetted by us. Because otherwise, you think he's going to care? He couldn't give a rat's ass what they tell him to do at home. The Windsors had become increasingly concerned about the safety of their French properties and paying the caretaker staff. Oh, yes. But see, here Churchill is once again just bending over backwards for Edward in a way that I just cannot even comprehend. Churchill personally, through the American ambassador in Paris, William Bullitt, arranged for the 55,000 francs in back rent on the Paris property to be paid together with 10,000 francs insurance and 15,000 francs due for the strong room space that they rented at the Bank of France, though the bank was under the control of Hitler. Apparently, their strong room had been broken into at the bank, and so they felt like they needed to secure their belongings. Now, apparently nothing was taken either. I guess the Nazis just wanted to see what it is they had. But it's ridiculous that you would even bother to spend 15,000 francs insurance for the strong room space when the people who are the ones in control are the ones who broke into it in the first place. Why are you giving them more money? Maybe I just don't understand the passage. There's a lot of things I don't get. Anyway, they reached out to Bedeau because he had acted as a go-between in the arrangements, and he was close to Billet, but he was also close to the Nazi ambassador Otto Abetz. And so they were trying to arrange for the Duke and Duchess's properties and money and things like that to be secure. Bedeau's activities continued to be monitored. And a note revealed that the German authorities had recently approached Bedeau and asked him to ask the Duke of Windsor whether he would be King of England in the event of a German victory. But interestingly, and unexplained to us, Monsieur Bedeau said, I'm not really friends with him anymore, so I can't tell you one way or the other. Odd. It was the German authorities who asked him this. It wasn't like an American or British intelligence agent had asked him, hey, could you give us a lowdown? Because he would, and then he said, no, I don't know him anymore. It's a German authority who asked him that. So I'm not sure what the falling out was there. And I think that if there was information on that falling out, we would have gotten it, because this book is quite detailed in all the things and repeats itself ad nauseum. Anyway, we don't know how that happened, but Bedeau was willing to be a go-between, but as far as carrying messages back and forth, that's where he drew the line. The British and the Americans, meanwhile, also kept watch on Meghan. After the Duke submitted for approval an ambitious proposal for social and agricultural development on the island of Grand Bahamas by Acts of Meghan, which would involve transfer to Meghan of large tracts of land, the Foreign Office contacted Washington seeking views. And why would the Duke think, after being told repeatedly by both the American and the British government, do not have anything to do with Axel Wenner. He is one giant question mark when it comes to his allegiance. Don't do it. Then he puts in some big proposal.
Well, I want to help the island, and Axel Wenner seems to know what to do, so I'll just, give him all the authority.
And then he thought it was actually going to be signed off on, and then anybody was going to be like, okay, that sounds okay. I mean, we've told you over and over not to have anything to do with him and to run his, for the hills, but now that you tell us you want him to take over the island and basically do your job, okay. Yeah, his wits certainly have wilted, haven't they? Well, of course, the U.S. gave their views, and they said Admiralty and MI5 have been consulted and are not inclined to favor Grant to person named on account of his somewhat doubtful political proclivities and strategic position of island. So in so many words, no. In the summer of 1941, the Windsors expressed a desire to visit the Duke's ranch in Canada. Delicate negotiations went on to avoid the Duke crossing with his brother, the Duke of Kent, who was due to visit in September, and to arrange a route that avoided Ottawa. There was also still the concern of ongoing isolationists at the time, when Britain was anxious to bring America into the war. I continue to just be flat out shocked that so much energy goes into managing this pathetic, witless ingrate. So what if he runs into his brother? I wish his brother would say a few things to him. Sometimes the energetic words of a younger sibling who is watching you make poor choices is sometimes the only thing that'll get into your crusted over heart. You know, I wish the Duke of Kent had run into him and been like, what the are you doing with your life? Pull it together, man. Come home and be of some use to us. You know? And quit asking for favors and tax breaks and all this. Why don't you just join the fray and care for somebody other than yourself, you outrageous ingrate? Anyway, they were always protected from each other. So many resources are diverted to help David. So much mental energy is being drained from people who really need to be able to fight a war with clear heads, but they're too busy dealing with over here between David and his horrible wife. And it just feels to me like, why did they bother to allocate mental and physical and financial resources to these people who are only going to continue to be a money suck, a mental suck, a mind suck, an emotion suck? Just get rid of those people. Be done with them. Don't give them a dime. Don't give them a station. Don't give them a minute of your time. Ignore, 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 ignore. Cut them out. Anyway, at the end of September 1941, the couple flew to Miami. And y'all, guess what? When they flew to Miami, Wallis Simpson had her eyes bandaged because she was afraid of flying. That makes zero sense on multiple levels. This is like the mental reasoning of a 2-year-old. No, I can't see it. If I can't see it, then it doesn't really exist. You know what I'm saying? Like, who bandages their eyes because they're afraid of flying? But also, if you have some kind of weird strategy that works for you so you can cope to get on a plane and fly out, why weren't you using that strategy when they tried to send multiple planes to get you when you were in France to take you back to England for safety at the beginning of the phony war? Why wasn't it then that you were able to rally some kind of outrageously incongruent with reality solution to get on a plane and get there? But now that she wants to go shopping, she's figured out a plan on how she can cope with her fear of planes. So she bandages her eyes. That makes next to no sense, but whatever, that's what she did. And when they finally got there, she ripped the bandages off her eyes so that she could see the 300 RAF cadets training with Pan Am instructors before taking a train to Washington, where there was a reception at the National Press Club and they stayed at the White House. Why? Why do these people get to stay at the White House? Again, don't show these people any kind of attention. They're not royalty. They're nothing. They're of no consequence. This isn't the King of England who just showed up. This is a man who chose his tawdry girlfriend and refused the responsibility of his country, and now is making deals with the Nazis. Ignore. If there was a person in life that you should just be like, I should probably ignore that person, this is the very descriptor of it. Anyway, from Washington, they continued by train. This train was lent to them by a friend, so I'm assuming they had the whole train to themselves. And they went through Chicago to the Alberta Ranch, where they spent the first week of October. Now, some background on this ranch. The book says that the Duke had bought the one-story building his first visit to Canada in 1919 and had paid short visits in the summers of 1923, 1924, and 1927. He had some grand scheme about stock breeding. He thought he could introduce the practices from the Duchy of Cornwall lands, and in 1930, he had spent almost $250,000 with the help of W.L. Carlyle, a professor of agriculture, and he built the finest breeding herd in Canada. But to no one's shock whatsoever, he made no money and had contemplated selling it several times. Well, of course he didn't make any money. It was 1930. The country has been thrown into a depression, right? And I know that it was in Canada, but there are global repercussions when the American stock market crashes. So, of course, he's not going to make any money. $250,000? I gotta have some kind of calculator beside me when I make these videos so I can do some quick calculations. What is that in today's money? Right there, right as the Depression begins, he's throwing this kind of money down the drain. And then it's like, oh man, I can't make any money at this ranch. Yeah, no kidding. Nobody can buy your beef. They're trying to find enough lard to spread on their bread. In 1932, the Canadians had gifted him several thousand adjacent acres of Crown land and rights to their mineral resources. But after the abdication, he realized that it would be difficult to return to what was British territory. You don't think. In 1938, the Duke had sold off the cattle herd, but the ranch continued to lose money, $3,000 in 1939, and attempts to sell it during the early parts of the war had come to nothing. At the end of 1940, the American polar explorer Lincoln Ellsworth had offered him $40,000 for the ranch, and the Duke was tempted to accept. But then, drilling for oil began in the area, so he can't hop off that property quite yet. He's got to find out if he's got some oil on his property. And it was this interest that had prompted the visit in 1941. Now, after they go and dig around on the ranch for a hot second, we don't find out if he's got oil or not. They decide to come back to America. And this was staggering to me. I could not believe it. I read it a couple of times over because I was like, surely, am I missing part of the story here? This is so insensitive and selfish and thoughtless. I just thought, no way. Two adults who have been in society for a while could act like this. How could they have such bad manners? But apparently, they were coming through Washington. People knew they were coming through Washington. A lunch had been planned. 22 people were invited to this lunch. But at the last minute, the Duchess calls it off. It was to be canceled because she said she preferred to send out for food. I don't want to eat at your lunch. I don't really know what's being served. I'm going to send out for something. And she said that the Duke likes to eat fruit in his bedroom for lunch. So we're not big lunch people. So no, thank you. No, thank you. Are you kidding me right now? What in the world? The audacious selfishness is beyond comprehension. 22 people, like a 22-person lunch, doesn't mean that someone was just throwing together some tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like you were just coming to eat at, somebody's breakfast nook while they threw out onto the table the leftovers from the fridge. 22-person luncheon had been planned, catered, prepared. People were expecting to come and meet them. And then for them to just call up and be like, well, the Duke likes to eat fruit on his bed and I like to order in my food. Could you not have let people know that beforehand? They would have told you the lunch was being prepared days and days ago. The invitation would have come to you much earlier. That would have been the time to say the Duke likes to sit on his bed and peel fruit and I like to order in, air you don't eat. So I'm not really sure what it is that you're ordering in. Cigarettes? I don't know. Whatever. The audacious selfishness continues. Dorothy Halifax, wife of the British ambassador to Lord Halifax, was outraged to be presented with a bill for £7.10 for a hire of a lorry to take their luggage to and from the station. And it did seem a little unnecessary for a 24-hour visit. Yeah, okay. We know that they travel with at least 72 pieces of luggage wherever they go. Why is it that they have to take all of the luggage back from the station all the way to the hotel room so that they can stay there for 24 hours, then bring it all the way back to the station? What, are you going to wear every single thing that's in 72 pieces of luggage? Come on. Lock that stuff up. I'm sure they got somewhere at the station for you to lock up your stuff. Unbelievable. And then to have the audacious selfishness to present somebody else with the bill. Why is it Lady Halifax's job to pay your lorry bill? Somebody explain to me how anybody could become so wildly self-consumed that they thought that their financial obligations to the lorry driver was somebody else's problem. Lady Halifax didn't have one piece of luggage in that entire lorry. So why in the world are you selecting this random person who happens to be British to pay your bills? Against advice, the couple stayed at the Waldorf Towers in New York, where they took a whole floor. And you know why they took a whole floor? Because they couldn't keep all their bags, boxes, luggage, all the junk they traveled with in one room and had to leave it out in the hall. You can't have the riffraff walking past your things. God forbid it. So they had to rent the whole floor so that they have somewhere to put all of their many, 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 many bags. And this little stay in New York was clearly not just like a little 24-hour visit, because listen to all they did while they were there. They saw doctors, lawyers, and friends, and they shopped. They saw some shows, and they ate out, but they also made time for public duties. Well, of course, you've got to do that. You've got to sell everybody on your peace initiatives and also your isolationist views. The Duke saw Mayor LaGuardia to discuss urban housing conditions. Remember, that's his big thing. He's going to become the everyman's man. While the Duchess visited a center for unmarried mothers and babies. They received mobile hospital units. They reviewed mobile hospital units of the British American Ambulance Corps, lunched with the British War Relief Society, inspected relief agencies, housing projects, and armaments factories, and played darts with sailors at the British Merchant Seamen's Club. Everywhere they went, they attracted large crowds who interfered with traffic, tossed ticker tape and shreds of phone books, and must inevitably have recalled to the Duke his wild reception here as Prince of Wales. Man, wouldn't you hate to be on the cleaning crew back then when it was like ticker tape parades every time you turned around for something? Oh, the absolute trash that must have been in the streets. What is just unacceptable, though, is the fact that not only did they attract the attention of a royal tour, they expected it. They have no business going about reviewing this, reviewing that, playing darts with sailors, going and seeing the British American Ambulance Corps. None of that. That's none of their business. None of that. They don't get to have one. This is what I don't understand. Everywhere they go, they get to, review the soldiers here and review this and, be shown about over here. What we don't care about your opinion. We don't need to show you any of this. None of this is your business. Your check off, that, oh, well, we showed it to the Duke and Duchess and they approved. Well, who cares? Why are you wasting your time or theirs? This is not their business and you shouldn't pretend that it is. Anyway, they traveled down from New York down to Baltimore, and the couple were met at the little station in Timonium in the Delaware Valley by a crowd of 5,000, including General Warfield, who was her Uncle Harry. He was the nearest relation she had, and they stayed with him on his 400-acre farmhouse where Wallace had often stayed as a child. At the official reception, there were crowds of 250,000 as they drove with the mayor in open cars and a police escort from City Hall to the Baltimore Country Club, where 800 people had been invited to meet them. The visit was taking on aspects of a royal tour. Aspects? It's exactly like a royal tour. That's all that it is. You're pretending that these people, because they have a British accent and are dressed very nicely, are way more important than they are. These are just two random people from Britain. This is not your business, and we should not be treating them as though they're this important. And also, one of them is an American, so I don't know why she's getting all of the pomp and circumstance. Anyway, they remained on message in support of the British war effort, but attracted criticism for not returning to the Bahamas, where many properties lived in by Black people had recently been destroyed in a hurricane. I mean, you gotta criticize these people where you can. Good for them that they decided to finally say that they were not against Britain and that they hoped it could be bombed into oblivion. But how are you really going to say that on this quote-unquote tour where everyone is looking to you as though you are a representative of Britain? That wouldn't have been the place to air your real personal thoughts about it anyway, because you like all the attention and these people want to hear that you support Britain. If these people had wanted to hear an isolationist view, he would have given that. But he knew who was buttering his bread in this situation, so he's going to say what he needs to say. On October 14th, the Duke traveled to Washington to see Lord Halifax, who wrote to Churchill. His visit seems to have gone off all right, and not attracted too much publicity. And on the whole, the press, with the exception of one or two rags, have behaved all right. I had a long talk to him a few days ago, in which he opened his heart and talked quite freely. He feels pretty bitter about being marooned in the Bahamas, which he says is a foul climate, and where there is nobody except casual American visitors whom he can see anything of it as a friend. I must say it certainly sounds pretty grim. Now, of course, the Windsors are not done touring the country and, making a pit stop with the Nazis that they can find on this continent. The Windsors inspected the automobile plants of Chrysler in Detroit, had tea with Henry Ford, and we all know he was a member of the Nazi Party, and saw James D. Mooney at Federal Motors. Lord have mercy. God forbid they just leave the place without having to meet with those two jokers. But of course, you got to find compatriots where you can, I suppose. Now, meanwhile, the FBI were building their file on the couple. At the end of September, they had interviewed the Reverend Dom Otto, a Benedictine monk, about a suspected Gestapo agent operating under cover of being a priest. Now, it says here that his file can be found in the National Archives in Kansas City, and the Zurich police had told the State Department that this Benedictine monk, Dom Otto, might be a Nazi agent, but there's no evidence to support that, and Lord Halifax was one of his supporters. Now, Reverend Dom Otto was not his given name. He was formerly Duke Karl Alexander of Württemberg, and he was a cousin of Queen Mary. And he related that he knows Queen Mary and her brother and the Earl of Athlone, the present Governor General of Canada, very well. He said that he'd come to America in 1940 from Portugal. Fleeing the Nazi regime in 1934, he had settled in Switzerland where, with financial assistance from Queen Mary, he'd set up an organization called Catholic Help for refugees to resettle Jews. Now, the FBI agent casually inquired whether Father Otto had seen the Duke and Duchess of Windsor during their recent visit to Washington. And he said, no, I haven't seen them this time, but I know them, and I've met her many times, on numerous occasions. And he reported that von Ribbentrop, while in England, sent the then Wallace Simpson 17 carnations every day. Why 17, you ask? Oh, he had an answer. The 17 carnations supposedly represented the number of times they had slept together. Wild. Madness. It's madness. But you also have to ask yourself, how did Reverend Dom Otto find this information? That's pretty scandalous. It's the most scandalous thing we've heard thus far about her and von Ribbentrop, and the fact that it came from Father Otto is shocking. But, maybe somebody decided to go to confession and say a couple of other things while they were at it. Further evidence was being gathered of the couple's sympathies, that the German legation claimed that the Duke was no enemy of Germany. This report that they found claimed that he was considered to be the only Englishman with whom Hitler would negotiate any peace terms, the logical director of England's destiny after the war. Hitler well knows that Edward at present cannot work in a manner that would appear to be against his country, and he does not urge it, a reliable informant on close terms with the Nazi agent reported. But when the proper moment arrives, he will be the only one person capable of directing the destiny of England. Again, this is damning news, but not new to us. I mean, we understand this information. It's just more clarity on what we already know. As a result of the Liberty article, the British authorities recognized that the Windsors needed a press spokesman to steer them clear of controversy. The first person they reached out to was Colin Davidson, who was an old friend of theirs. And he said, I'm not doing that unless I get promoted from major to lieutenant general. And so they let that go because they're like, we're not going to give you any leg up here. Just do what you're asked to do. So then they asked Renee McCall, head of press and radio at the British Information Service. And this person was appointed solely for the U.S. part of the visit, with instructions that the Duke must say as little as possible, must hold no press conferences, give no interviews, and make no statements. So Renee McCall says to the Duke, once he's been given this little post, hey, let's you and me have a little chit-chat, shall we? What exactly are your views about isolationism, and how are you feeling about that these days? And the Duke said that he didn't really hold those views anymore. That's just something he said during the phony war, but now he saw the importance of supporting Britain. That's what he said one day. But then the next day, the Duke came to him the very next morning and said,
You know what? I've been thinking, and I've been talking to the Duchess a little bit, and I think we'll play this one by ear. I'm not committing, and I don't want you to say I've committed to any sort of political decision, because the Duchess says I haven't. In the end, the visit had been carefully controlled with set speeches and a few interviews. When she'd been interviewed, Wallace had claimed, I'm afraid people credit me with much more interesting clothes than I really have. I care far more about the poor little children of Nassau. It's them, not clothes, I intend to shop for. I want to buy them all Christmas presents.
And first of all, that is stupid on its face. You're going to buy every child in the Bahamas a Christmas present? Get the hell out of here. But with the amount of money she was spending, she probably could have. But of course it's all a lie, because her statements were rather contradicted when a number of packages were picked up en route from the designer Mainbacher and Bergdorf Goodman. So why don't you just shut it? Oh, I didn't realize that all the children in the Bahamas wanted a brand new designer dress. It's hard to keep up with what the kids want these days. Though some press coverage had been favorable, a running media theme was the extent of the Windsor's luggage, estimated to be up to 73 pieces and often had to be left in hotel corridors. And questions about how they funded their spending, given currency restrictions, were at the top of everyone's mind. They're spending, as many people said, like drunken sailors. Where's all this money coming from? There was restrictions on currency. Now, of course, we do have that one report where they were just going into shops and basically charging them Like what did they write you, an IOU? I don't understand exactly how those interactions went, but that's one way they were getting what they wanted. But there was some poking about in their bank accounts, in their American bank accounts, that were astounding. 3 weeks later, Halifax, in a most secret telegram for the Foreign Office, reported, so far as I could ascertain, the only banking accounts in the United States in the name of the Duke or Duchess of Windsor are 2 accounts with Chase Bank in the name of the Duchess. One account covers securities to the value of $9,000, while the other account had a credit balance of $29,931 on the 14th of June this year. But the astounding thing is that just last year, this bank account had $1,197 in it. So where's all this money coming from? No one knows. But even worse is that it's all in her name. The Duke doesn't even have half the money in his own name. We've covered that before. And that's why for a long time he was able to hide his nefarious connections and the questionable ways in which he was getting so much money. I mean, we really don't know where all this money is coming from. We have our ideas. But he was able to hide for a long time from the powers that be that he had this much money because he was squirreling it all away in accounts under her name. According to Charles Higham, the surrounding documents are missing from Lord Avon's files in the Public Record Office in London, but it is clear from this memorandum that the gravest suspicions have yet again been aroused of the Windsor's improper use of currency against all the restrictions in force of the time. Documentation located in the National Archive in Washington, D.C. indicated that the couple had obtained even more black market currency through exile. Well, of course they've got to keep that guy close. He's the one that's supplying them with money. And how are they supposed to feed their shopping addiction if they don't have it? You know, if they've got to live on that godforsaken island, at least they can go shopping in Miami whenever. Now, on November 24th, in light of the media coverage, a Labor MP, Alexander Sloan, asked a parliamentary question drawing attention to the, quote, ostentatious display of jewelry and finery at a period when the people of this country are strictly rationed, and suggesting that the couple be, quote, recalled since their visit is evidently doing a certain amount of harm and no good. Churchill telegrammed the Duke expressing regret at the personal attacks. Events were to overtake the criticisms. On December 7th, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and America finally came into the war. Within a week, Meghan, long suspected of sheltering U-boats on Hog Island, was on the official U.S. economic blacklist. Shangri-La was closed, the staff cut from 30 to 7, the Bank of the Bahamas, in which the Windsors had an interest, was closed, and the exotic birds sold or given away. A search of the property found none of the supposed landing strips or submarine pens. But America's entry into the war may have silenced the Windsors' defeatist sentiments, but fresh controversy was now to follow them. And that is the end of that. But wasn't that a juicy chapter? Those two are so egregious in every conceivable way. I can't stand them. I can't stand them at all. I find them so much worse than Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan, as I've said many's the time before, are just a couple of fools. You know, they're just stumbling through life without a plan. They are malicious and vicious, but they're not smart enough to do damage. I feel like David falls right in line with their level of stupidity, greed, and malice. But I think Wallis Simpson was quite cunning. I mean, she was evil on, like, next level evil, and she was clearly the one running the show. She owned all the money. She's the one negotiating with the Nazis. She's the one who's going to drive this ship. And so it's not surprising to me that we're reading about a lot of terrible things that they did, because of the two couples, there's a brain in the operation between Wallis and David, and there's no brain over there with Harry and Meghan. You know, those two people, they don't have the work ethic to get trouble started. Anyway, and I know, and we've said this many's the time, I know that they are in league with some really nefarious sources, but those sources are nefarious in and of themselves. Harry and Meghan do not up the ante of negativity from any of these places that they're involved with. Whereas with David and Wallis, I mean, Wallis, I feel like, was able to get things done, because Wallis used her own body to negotiate with these people. That affair that she had with Ribbentrop had nothing to do with the fact that she was in love with Ribbentrop, but because she sensed that he was a person of power. You know, so she is over here willing to sacrifice her own body on the altar of power. I don't know what Meghan was up to. Meghan may have done things too that are really questionable. I know everybody's like, back in her yacht days. I don't know anything about her yacht days. I've never read anything. I've never heard tell. I'm not saying that they didn't exist. I'm not saying that she isn't just a fool. I don't believe her pregnancies were real. I think there's enough weird pictures to prove that she's capable of extended lies. But I don't think she's. But I mean, look how poorly she pulled that off. There's pictures of her stomach falling down to her knees. There's pictures of her kneeling on the ground to talk to small children. If you are that pregnant, your knees could not be together. So where's the baby going to go? If you were even able to squat down on the ground, your knees would have to separate so your belly could go between your legs. You know, so enough already of us even believing for 1 second that she birthed those kids out of her own womb. But she's capable of extended lies, but not well-told lies, but she has no work ethic. And nobody trusts her well enough. And she's not charming enough or smart enough for people to use her and to negotiate with her so that she could gain another foothold in power. Meanwhile, I think that Wallace Simpson was quite cunning and clever. Devious enough and clever enough that people could have trusted that, you know, when all this is said and done, we can rely on a Wallace Simpson here. She'll manage to get work done for us. She's devious, clever, and hardworking. And that is why I can't hardly compare the two women. Though that's just my take on it. Anyway, I thought it was a good chapter, so you let me know what you thought down in the comments. And I will see you guys next Sunday for this book, but of course I'll see you before that during the week.